Hello there. I am your trainer, Donovan Gionis, and welcome to a non-standard operating procedure, where the user will be able to both design and operate their own coaster. We'll start by selecting a drop. I'm going to go with a curve drop, and then we'll proceed to the meat of the layout design, where we can use this sort of map key, if you will, of elements, and use the letters indicated on them to engage in key presses to generate instances of these elements. So we have a vertical loop, which is a type of upside-down inversion, and then we can go into a straightaway if we'd like, and then we could do a dive loop. And from the dive loop, let's go into one of the most ubiquitous inversions out there, 0G barrel roll. And if you'll notice, I can manipulate these track pieces pretty easily. I can rotate them down, and in some of them, like this cobra roll, I can actually flip them. So we'll go ahead and add that. And then we'll start making our way to one of the more unique track pieces found on most coasters, a mid-course brake run. Now, all roller coasters built in the modern era run on something known as block logic. Block logic is basically the principle of running multiple trains or ride units on a continuous circuit at one time, and designating a certain section a certain number of track segments in which only one train will be allowed to travel through at a time. This prevents any collisions that might happen. So by adding a mid-course brake run, we actually increase the number of trains we can run. By default, we can operate with just 2 trains, but by adding one mid-course brake run, we're now allowed to operate with 3 trains. So as we're coming out of this mid-course brake run, we can add a couple of smaller but pretty quick-paced elements like flat spins or corkscrews, as some people see them. And we can start trying to make our way to the finish line, or the final entrance to the main brakes. Now, as we make our way, you may be wondering what happens if the layout circuit isn't complete. We hit the Shift key for design evaluation, we'll see that it recursively detects that the layout isn't complete. So we'll resume, and we'll start making our way back to the finish. We'll add one more little quick bit of excitement. Invert this corkscrew. And now that we have our circuit completed, it checks out, and it gives us certain ride statistics that are custom for each layout that a user might design, and it even gives labels and a little bit of information about the different blocks. So now that we've made it to ride operation, we see our console, a status screen with the statuses of all the different blocks and the locations of the trains, as well as whether or not they are moving or halted. As you can see, train 0 is in the station. Dispatch is enabled as indicated by the flashing light. However, we should go ahead and load these riders up. So we'll open the gates by pressing the G key, and we'll unlock the restraint, thus loading the 22 riders on. We'll lock the restraints, close the gates, and that'll enable us to then dispatch. So we'll dispatch and then get things moving. As soon as the station block clears, the train 1 that was halted in block 4 will now be moving from block 4 into block 1. And as you can see, the block statuses are updating in a live manner. Now, if we look here up to the station, we see different dots representing people, and the dots all have numbers. Now, basically, these numbers indicate the number of people in that individual guest group. So there's a built-in algorithm here that loads these groups into the trains in a rather unique way. Basically, they iterate through each row and load them in. However, if it's an even-numbered group and there's only an odd number of seats available in that row, it will iterate to the next row to allow even-numbered groups a greater potential towards everyone sitting together and having no single riders having to sit with other groups. Now, with odd-numbered groups, that rule doesn't apply because it's usually more difficult to load odd-numbered groups onto coasters, and so they usually are able to come to terms with the idea of having one person riding as a single rider. But as you can see, lots of things are updating on the screen, and it keeps track of basically all components of the ride and the operational aspects, as would be true for a real roller coaster. So I hope you have some fun and pass the time by playing a non-standard operating procedure. Thank you.